Hello and welcome to another episode of Attacking Third, a CBS Sports soccer podcast. I'm Sandra Herrera, lead NWSL writer for CBS Sports. Joined today, as always, by my colleague and co-host Lisa Roman, broadcaster and analyst for CBS Sports. On today's episode, we've got more news and notes for you all and the reintroduction of our mailbag segment. But a first reminder to follow us on Twitter for all breaking news at Attacking Third. And if you're watching us on YouTube, welcome. Go ahead and hit subscribe. And you'll never miss whenever we go live, and you can let us know what you like to hear from us and leave us all kind of questions and stuff like that. So I'm ready to dive into more news and notes, Lisa, question mark, and questions. There's a few things that we got to get into here today a little bit. How are you doing?
There are a lot of things we have to talk about. It's funny. Sometimes we don't do news and notes episodes for a little bit just because we have a lot of other things going on, or there's not too much news breaking or happening. But there's been a lot happening over the last few days, a lot that we have to talk about, a lot that we have to dive into and kind of cover. Because as we were talking off mic, Sandra, this Challenge Cup starts in 10 days from our recording right now, 10 days.
It's hard to believe because we've been doing a lot of, the team by team previews that, for everybody to check out. So that's been keeping us very, very active. Like you said, it is March. March is officially here. So we've been, spreading our wings a little bit. We've been doing our Title IX Tuesdays, and that has been a lot of fun for us. We had a great interview with Sam Ewis, and we're branching out into some other areas of sport. And we had a interview with Coach Sandy Rondello. So that was very cool. And there's going to be more that we're going to continue to do as we continue to celebrate International Women's Month here and Women's History Month in the month of March. But there's this, while we're branching out, there's March Madness that's going to be coming up, right? You've got, March Madness coming up for Selection Sunday on March 13th. And we want Attacking Third listeners, we want you to actually compete in a bracket challenge game with us. I'll be in there. Lisa Roman will be there. U.S. Women's National Team star Lori Lindsay will be there. We've got our social media superstar Sydney who's going to be there. We're like having everyone come in and participate in this, but we mostly want you as well. So you can join us at cbssports.com/attacking third. And the winner is going to get $100 gift card to Paramount Plus. But whoever just enters one single pool. I know, Lisa, you don't. I know I don't. We're going to be doing a women's bracket challenge this year. The game works just like the men's, with a chance to win a trip to the 2023 Women's Final Four. Plus, anyone that plays both the men's and the women's challenge brackets will be entered to win a Nissan Frontiers. So you can head on over cbssports.com/attacking third, compete in both women's and men's bracket challenges. You get a chance to win a Nissan Rogue in the men's bracket, and if you enter both, a Nissan Frontier, and you get a chance to go to the 2022 Final Four and 2023 Final Four. And if you win the Attacking Third bracket, you get the $100 gift card to Paramount Plus. We're just trying to spread the goodies here.
Oh my gosh, we're giving out so much for this March Madness bracket challenge. I am like so hyped. You have the chance to win 2 cars. What?
Come on. I would love to have just one of those.
2 cars, potential to go to this year's Final Four and next year's Final Four in 2023, and $100 Paramount Plus gift card if you win like our Attacking Third bracket. That's the men's and the women's. So like either side gets $100 Paramount Plus gift card, which means you get to watch NWSL all season long because all the games will be on Paramount Plus. We want you guys to win. We want to give you free stuff and have you, I don't know, enjoy it, but you have to win. That's the other thing. And I'm in there and I'm pretty competitive, so have fun.
Have fun. You said it here, Lisa. Okay. Don't start talking smack or like throwing too much banter around, right? For the people who join us up in this. But $100 for Paramount Plus can go a long way, especially, you can watch the NWSL games. Yeah. But we got all kinds of great women's soccer content on there as well. Obviously, the qualifiers for CONCACAF have been taking place. We'll have the remainder of that kicking off in April. We've got FA Women's Super League coming through on Paramount Plus. So there's a lot there. So that gift card's going to go a long way to whoever ends up winning that. But let's take a look ahead here to our news and notes portion. There was something that we wanted to kick off the top of our segment with here. When the news broke, we actually wanted to take a second to just sort of try to process the news, because it's very sad news. It's very tragic news. It's the talking about the death of Katie Meyer. She passed away on March 1st. People probably most familiar with her as the Stanford goalkeeper. There has been a wave of support in light of the news of her death. Orlando Pride and Kansas City Current actually went ahead and honored Katie's life in their preseason scrimmage on March 2nd. The parents of Katie Meyer, Gina and Steve Meyer, going on the Today Show and doing an interview and confirming that Katie Meyer's death was a death by suicide. She was 22 years old, a senior majoring in international relations and minoring in history. And again, people are probably most familiar with her in the sports world as a team captain for the Cardinal. She ended up guiding Stanford to a 2019 national championship as a redshirt freshman. But devastating news all around to hear it. And we just wanted to take the time to acknowledge that at the top of this episode and send our sincere condolences, and also reiterate that if you or someone you know is at risk of suicide, to please call the U.S. National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255, or you could text HOME to 741-741, or head on over to speakingofsuicide.com/resources for additional resources. But yeah, absolutely sad news, unfortunately, that we have to start off the news segment with here.
Yeah, a heart just constantly breaking for Katie, her family, her friends, her teammates. And we did need to take a minute. I mean, you and I checked in on each other, and it's not just checking in on your loved ones and your friends and your families and your coworkers, but asking them, are you okay? How are you doing today? Do you have these thoughts? Things like this is just horrible. And Katie's story and her life is consistently and continuously making waves, not just across the sports world, but really across the world over these next few days. So we did want to celebrate her life and keep her family, her teammates, her friends in our thoughts here at Attacking Third. And I don't know, it's sad, really sad.
Yeah, it's been tough. And yes, not only are we sharing condolences or sending condolences to her immediate family, but also, her extended family and extended friends. We've been seeing a lot from her former teammates and their reaction to the news. I think most notably is Naomi Girma, who was part of that 2019 Stanford championship run there, putting out all kinds of really beautiful and thoughtful memorials across their socials to try to commemorate, Katie Meyer in the way that they will always remember her. Sort of a very bright spot in their life. So once again, we just want to reiterate again, if you or someone you know is at risk, please go ahead and seek out the resources. And yeah, just continue to try and be there for each other as best as you can. And we're going to try to continue to be there for each other as well. Myself and Lisa, and try to, do our best to get through the rest of this episode a little bit, because there are some other things going on in the world of women's soccer. It's not just stateside of things. We also try to keep an eye here on things going on in other facets of the globe. We want to talk a little bit about Vivianne Miedema. She made a little bit of history, so that's a little bit of something to celebrate here as well. First to reach 100 goal contributions in the FA WSL, 70 goals and 30 assists for the Dutch international. Huge, right? A name that we always see whenever we're talking about conversations of like the best, right? Currently in the women's soccer landscape.
Yeah, and 100 goals in one league. I mean, that's incredibly, incredibly impressive. It has been done before, but this is a forward. She plays for Arsenal. She's incredibly good. I mean, everyone knows how good she is, but to kind of see her hit this peak of her career and at this point in the season is pretty exciting. I know she was pretty pumped about it, and media around the world was kind of excited about this. I was excited to talk about this and kind of see her do that and celebrate it. And her goals are always so fun, Sandra. That's like the other part. They're not just like right place, right time, tap in goals or like good movement off the ball goals. They're like incredible soccer goals. I just go watch her highlight reels, like Vivianne Miedema highlight goal reel, like fantastic stuff. So huge congrats to her. 100 goals in the WSL. here's to 100 more. Let's do it.
I mean, look, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but I would
No,
love to see it. I will say that I would just love
possible.
to see it. Yeah, we'll see what the forward for Arsenal has, still left in her, I guess, in her arsenal, right?
25.
Quote
She's
unquote.
25 years old, so plenty of time to get 100 more.
I mean, yeah, easy peasy, right? Like if she
Easy.
already got 100 now, she can get 100 in the next, in the next decade. I would love to see it. Some news back stateside that we got to touch on a little bit. Cindy Parlow Cone reelected as U.S. soccer president. Reelection for the next 4 years. Cone was someone who actually was placed in the presidential seat after Carlos Cordero stepped down back in March 2020 after kind of his fumbling, right, of the U.S. women's national team discrimination lawsuit. Was formerly vice president, and kind of maybe a full circle our story
Mhm.
arc to this reelection process. But it was actually Carlos Cordero who ran against Parlow Cone this year and ended up losing in this election process. So congratulations are in order for Cindy Parlow Cone. Probably making outside of the whole reelection process, right, and having to go head to head once again with Cordero. Probably the most recent headline adjacent to this was her role and her place in that settlement with the United States
Mhm.
women's national team.
Yeah, I mean, this is huge, and it's kind of interesting that she only won by 52.9% of the weighted vote. So she didn't really win by a landslide in any means. But leading up to this election, the election is made up of current players, like athlete council, who has a percentage of the vote in who becomes the U.S. soccer president. And across social media, players that are on this athlete council were putting out their support of Cindy Parlow Cone, saying, I'm going to vote for her. This is who I'm going to vote for, making that really public and really verbal and really well known. So this will be, although she's been the president for the last 2 years, this will be her first time elected into this role as president and her first 4-year term, because this will be her first full term that she has, because she did slide in from vice president into the presidential role after former president stepped down. So I'm kind of excited to see what changes. I don't know,
Yeah.
knowing that you have 4 years at a role and 4 years to make a change, and frankly, all of the change that she was able to make in just 2 years at the settlement between U.S. soccer and the U.S. women's national team, which most recently has been the most talked about in the U.S. soccer, U.S. women's national team realm of the world. The fact that she was able to kind of close that settlement and draw up a conclusion in just 2 years of that is pretty impressive. We actually got a chance to speak with her along with Poppy Miller on HQ after the settlement came out about kind of what this means for her as a president. And I asked her, I was like, does this help your reelection campaign? And she was pretty honest about it. She was like, I don't do things to get reelected. I do things because they need to be done right now, and it's the right thing to do. If people like it and they want to see more of that, they will reelect her. So now that this has happened, she's been reelected. But that conversation around the settlement is still now drafting a CBA between the men's team, the women's team, and U.S. soccer. But because Cindy Parlow Cone is a former player, she's been involved in the settlement conversations over the last few years. Now she will continue to be involved in those CBA conversations. It almost makes for a bit of continuity for all sides, because she's going to carry that through for the next 4 years. But from players' reactions, this is a pretty big win for them. They wanted her. They outwardly said they were going to vote for Cindy Parlow Cone. And Carlos Cordero, he's lost, so now he's kind of out of the picture, at least for the next 4 years.
At least for now, right? Yeah, I think it's important with you noting kind of the voting process there, and that yes, majority vote, right? But that it wasn't exactly this sort of landslide victory for Parliament,
Mhm.
which I felt was probably the more interesting kind of storyline coming out of this election process, right? This whole concept of weighted votes versus unweighted
Yeah.
votes and et cetera. It's an interesting process, to say the least. We'll just sort of sum it up with that kind of word. You sort of wonder where these angles, like where these particular parties, where their votes were lying, and obviously, uh, Cindy Parlow Cone got the ones that ended up, equating to the most, towards the end, and that's what ends up mattering, I think, in the most in the long run, especially like you said, Lisa, when there has to be this CBA that has to be negotiated. I think it would have been maybe a little nerve wracking, to say the least, if she wasn't maybe the president that was still in place to help kind of continue, these back and forth kind of ratifying and negotiating between this next CBA that has to take place with not just one but two national teams. So I'm sure that's something that we're going to have to continue to pay attention to, when it comes to the national women's soccer team side of things. But in terms of back on the pitch, when we're looking at the news dropping globally, in case you missed it, Manchester City are the 2022 Conti Cup winners. They won by defeating Chelsea 3-1. Love a big rivalry win, right? That ends up in a trophy. You had goals from Carolyn Ware, Ellen White, and Chelsea Sam Kerr getting on the board, but not enough. And it's the fourth time for Man City winning the Conti Cup, coming from behind, actually, because it looked like for a second there that Chelsea was going to make this a difficult day.
Yeah, it did. Sam Kerr getting on the board first, but it was a second half showing for Man City coming up, which is pretty fun. I mean, this is the first domestic trophy of the season. And Man City walks away with the win. This is the fourth time they're winning it. Chelsea, they've won it twice before, looking for that third win and falling short against it. But there was also some momental moments that happened throughout this match. Lucy Bronze, she racked up her 100th Man City appearance for the club. Ellen White, who scored the third goal for City, that was her 30th career City goal, so pretty big for her. And Carolyn Ware, who had a brace in the game, ultimately winning 3-1 over Chelsea. Her second goal of the game was her 10th of the season. And the last three games, Ware has scored 4 goals. So it was pretty fun, pretty exciting to watch. I believe Caroline Ware won the Women of the Match honor after this one. But yes, this was a fun game. It was pretty big win, I think. I mean, I like this rivalry between Chelsea and Man City. And even though Chelsea got out first and Sam Kerr scored, which not really surprising there, I was impressed with how Man City came back in the second half and they were able to win this one. But yeah, props to City on getting this Conti Cup win.
Yeah, I don't know if it's it was maybe the perception of score first and hold things down. I know Chelsea was missing a huge presence, right? In the midfield there. They're missing somebody like a Jessing Fleming. They're missing some pretty key role players, and you can make the argument, right, that maybe it wasn't a full strength team. But I mean, you look at Chelsea's roster up and down, and you're just like, there's enough.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're just like, there's enough. So I mean, congrats to Man City lifting the cup. I mean, for first one of the year, like you said. So we'll pay attention to a Women's Super League and see how things continue to shake out there across the pond. Let's jump back into NWSL for a little bit and chat a little bit about some news there. NWSL announcing a deal with Delta Airlines, Delta Airlines becoming the official airline and travel partner of the National Women's Soccer League. It's a multi-year partnership. It's the first ever airline sponsor of NWSL. And I got to say, Lisa, let's talk about it a little bit before we move on into more NWSL news. When this drops and you sort of see all the words, right, all the verbiage that comes out of it, you're like, okay, official airline and travel partner, right? So you're you're looking at these releases, and I think right away that kind of signals you're looking for you're like, oh, this is going to be great for the players, right? But when we're taking a look at some of these releases, kind of leaving some questions open there, right?
Yes, that was honestly my first reaction. Maybe I'm a little over optimistic or I haven't been around long enough. I don't really know. I was like, this is so exciting. The league has an airline partner. The players now have a consistent airline that they get to fly. They have a consistent flying schedule, maybe consistent seats, because that's been a huge topic of conversation in the league is players flying and middle seats, and they have to check a bag and it's on their own dime. And there's a lot of things that happened. And when I saw this, I was like, wow, did I miss that in the CBA? However many times I read or talked about the CBA, did I miss that they would have more consistent or fair, or at least flying abilities that were like even across the board for them and their teammates and across the teams? No. So this is a partnership, but financially solely, I'm kind of like confused about this because it is the first airline partnership of the league and starting their 10th year. This is about time. But from the press releases that I've seen and what's been announced, it doesn't mean that the players will be flying Delta. It doesn't mean that Delta will be securing flights or seats for the players and the teams while they're in season traveling to away games. I mean, so that was kind of my initial reaction. I was like super pumped. And then it was like deflating of the balloon as I continued to read the press release. Like, oh, this is just for finances and for the name of it. I mean, what did you think about this? It's a multi-year partnership too.
I mean, look, I mean, there's different angles where you could sort of come at to this, right? You can look at it glass half full. You can look at it glass half empty. There's and I don't think either are wrong. I think there are truths to either side of it, right? Is it a good thing that the league continues to find ways to ensure that there is money that comes into the league? Yeah, absolutely.
Totally.
100%, right? Does it, is it kind of unsettling that this deal doesn't include something that includes a direct travel implication for its players? Yeah, like these are all things that could be true at the same time, right? Neither one's, I think, right or wrong. Although, additional reporting out there, shout out to Meg Lenahan, friend of the podcast, saying that, it doesn't rule out. Sources are saying that it's not ruling out further conversations about that type of angle to work with, with Delta for players in terms of the actual language around flights and travel for the players moving forward. But I think with the announcement of this deal, I think it comes following some reporting from Howard Megel on the WNBA, where there was a big story about coming out about chartered flights and the New York Liberty specifically, and trying to utilize their resources to ensure that their players are always able to travel the best way they can. And it's just sort of like all of these things kind of coming out adjacent to each other, just sort of, I think, maybe made people sort of want to try to connect some dots or feel things some certain kind of way. We're talking 10 years, right, for this league in existence. Just now finally having, an airline sponsor, right? There's things to celebrate there. But I'm sure there's also going to be, a contingent and a sector of, followers of the league who are like, gosh, it's been a decade and there's just now going to be, like an airline sponsor. So I think this can only be a good thing when you're looking at just sort of the generalization of it, and that, hey, money into the league is always going to be a huge and important thing. And hopefully this will just maybe be the first step of maybe other things that could come along the way with a sponsorship deal like this in place, and obviously there were things within the announcement. There's things that are titled that the multi-year deals, yes, it's going to include other opportunities for things like fan engagement. It's going to be, in addition to programming for diversity, and inclusion. So these are all good things within it. So as it's getting announced, as the league is entering the 10th year, celebrate it, right? In terms of like, it is a big announcement, but there's nothing wrong with continuing to want more. I think as these announcements, these types of deals and announcements continue to get announced and rolled out. In terms staying with the NWSL and other news, there's still some signing news to talk about a little bit. Washington Spirit signing their 2022 draftee Tanaya Alexander, and re-signing Kelley O'Hara to a 1-year deal. Spirit just locking them up, just really locking them up and looking like they're the team to chase for 2022.
Yeah, and these deals coming out like after the preseason rosters. But yeah, I mean, it's good to see them continuing to sign players, give them deals and everything that's happening. It just means we're getting one step closer to the start of the season, Sandra. And that's like really what I'm pumped about. And there's also been NWSL preseason matches that have been happening and scrimmages. We talked about them a little bit in Monday's episode of this week, but more tournaments starting. We touched on that. Portland was hosting and a preseason tournament with OL Reign, Chicago Red Stars, and the United States U23 women's national team. That has kicked off. There are actually more games Tuesday evening. We're recording this Tuesday afternoon, and the second round of games happened tonight. So stay tuned to those to find out what happened. But OL Reign in Portland, they opened the tournament with their little scrimmage 0-0 in the opening match of this tournament. And then Chicago Red Stars and the US U23 team, they also tied 0-0. So interesting, off to an interesting start. But I think from looking at these games that happened, there's a lot of player rotation, a lot of different players looking to get minutes and stuff. Yes, which is what you want to see, right? I mean, 17 different players featured for the Thorns throughout this one. A lot of young players, a lot of new players, and that's exactly what you want to see. So take the scoreline at face value, with a grain of salt, for sure.
Yeah. 0-0 scoreless draws. You know what they call that? They call that preseason, baby. And it's going to still got about 10 days to a week or so left of it before we start getting into Challenge Cup action. And we'll have more on that in the future. And we're going to actually have more for you after a quick break when we talk a little bit about our mailbag. And we'll be right back. We are back to answer your questions. For those of you who do not know, you can ask Lisa and I a question, and we will answer it as part of our mailbag segment. If you leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts with a question, we'll answer it. It could be about NWSL, the United States women's national team. It could be about my hats. It could be about rules, contracts. It could be about, starting 11s, teams, players, with whatever. But you got to leave the 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and you got to leave your question, and we'll.
Sandra, did you read this before? Because I put in there about your hats, and I love that you put it on air. That's amazing.
Listen. I love to talk about style and profile and everything else. So, I feel like if anything, we almost don't have enough time to ever get into that kind of stuff. So if people want us to get more into it, you got to let us know. But when we're looking through some of these questions, we actually like to filter through some of these and try to maybe actually find some questions that maybe actually already have some answers, right?
Yeah.
And be able to maybe try to give our, not our perspective, sort of now that there has sort of been some clarity on these questions, because believe it or not, some of the questions that people have are some of the same questions that Lisa and I have a lot of the times as well. So we're going to shout out Soccer Girl 11 here, who asked us about Julie Ertz. Like, hey, like she's been out for a little while. She's actually had a significant injury for some time. Is this the type of injury that could be, way heavier now, more than we possibly knew? And honestly, it was a fair question. And here we are now, a little further into the year, a little closer, right, to the Challenge Cup happening. And not only that, there has been a preseason that's been in full swing already since February 1. And there have been, preseason rosters that dropped, and not only dropped, but got edited, right, ahead of the Challenge Cup that's coming up. And one of the things that happened on the Angel City side of things is that, hey, like they were asked about that and addressed about that. And a spokesperson for the franchise went ahead and said they don't expect Julie Ertz to compete in 2022, but they, however, do have her player rights and are ready when she is to go ahead and welcome her with open arms into the market as part of the Angel City family. So there's not a lot of detail within a statement like that, right? In regards to the thing or the route or whatever. But it is confirmation that I think people were speculating a bit about in terms of, are people going to see Julie Ertz play in 2022? And it sounds like that's more of a no than anything else.
Yes. And I think that as much as like, I balance this line as well of like being a fan and wanting to know everything about these players' lives and why aren't they here and what are they doing, but also like this is their lives. And if they come out and make a statement that they don't want to play, we can maybe infer about why that could be, but there's a million different reasons. And it could be her personal life and her personal information to not tell the fans, to not even tell her club. It could be a certain situation there. There are just a lot of different levels to this. Her husband, Zach Ertz, got moved. He's now in Arizona, so that could have something to do with it. I mean, at least they're both on the West-ish coast together. There's just like so many different factors coming into this, but I think it's pretty safe to say that that we will not see Julie Ertz in 2022. I mean, as of the statement she's made and come out and said, and Angel City has agreed with, and the spokespeople have said, not really looking like we're going to see her. And she could still be recovering from that injury that she suffered in 2021. Although she played throughout the Olympics in Tokyo, we didn't see her during the regular season for Chicago Red Stars because she was injured and trying to recover from that knee injury. And she's taken a beating over the years. There could be a lot of different factors as to why she is not stepping onto the pitch this year. But Angel City does have her rights. They made a trade for her with Chicago, so they have her rights. We'll see kind of what happens as we know more. We will tell you guys for sure. We'll do our best.
For sure. And we're going to take another one here and shout out TCMIATA, who asked us, do the United States women's national team members have to sign contracts directly with the clubs now? Did the allocation / paid by U.S. soccer concept officially go away? Should we be expecting these deals to be published? And obviously what we're seeing is the answer to that is yes. There is what we've been hearing in the news lately that we've been reading now that the agreement to a settlement has been in place, right, for the United States women's national team and U.S. soccer and the previous lawsuit, is that a CBA has to be ratified. That is the next step, right? So with the 24 million settlement that got agreed to, with 22 million in back pay and a $2 million fund to sort of maintain and help and support former players and future players in their retirements will be in place. That also include a promise for equal pay that was going to be contingent on ratifying a new CBA. And what we know is within previous CBA and now probably likely into the future, that the U.S. allocation system is something that is likely no longer to be in place, as U.S. soccer is still partnered with NWSL, but not in a managing sense. So what we've seen over the course of this offseason are a ton of new contracts for, in the past, players who were considered or labeled as United States allocated players, right? So
yeah.
Sam Ewis, right, was probably that first player kind of kicking things off as a trade was made for her between Kansas City and North Carolina Courage. And then we saw a really, really big one with Chicago Red Stars signing 4 former national team caliber players to club-specific contracts with Tierna Davidson, Alyssa Nair, Mallory Pugh, Casey Kruger as well. And today, as we just talked about, Washington Spirit going ahead and signing Kelley O'Hara to a 1-year deal to keep her in place with Washington Spirit for 2022. So this is a trend that we really saw get kicked off, kind of last year, but really sort of kind of taking on a new kind of regular kind of sense of normalcy moving forward into 2022. And we're going to continue to see it moving, into the future, I'm sure, as well.
Yes, this trend will continue, and players will be signing with their clubs. It's for sure. I foresee that happening, but other players still have contracts to kind of live out. So that's another turn of this coin. And it's why it hasn't all happened with every single player right now at this moment, because if you sign a 2-year deal, a 2-year contract last year, you still have to live out another year of that. So give it the next few years, the next several years before all of these players kind of trade over to their club team. And then as the CBA hopefully comes out between men's, women's side, and U.S. soccer at the national team level, I think we could also see some changes then again once that happens. But of course, there's no timeline for that. And those conversations are going to take a long time. It's been talked about already for such a long time. So to actually find a conclusion and come to that, it's going to take a little bit longer. But I like these questions that we got today, Sandra. A little personal questions about Julie Ertz and what her status is, about contracts and U.S. soccer national team. Hit us, guys. We love these questions for our mailbag segment. We want to hear from all of you guys about them, whatever it is. Sandra's hats, our wish list starting 11. We got one before, I think many months ago when we were doing these, that was like, okay, you can't pick these 7 players, but which players do you want to create your U.S. women's national team starting 11 from? And then they can't all be young players and they have to be this. There was like a lot of different qualifiers. We had a lot of fun with that. So anything that you're wondering about, you're curious about, leave us a question on Apple Podcasts with a 5-star review, and we're going to answer it during our mailbag segment because we like these. And as the season's starting up again, we're getting rosters out, preseasons. The FA WSL is continuing. Ask us all the questions. We're here to answer them.
I love it. I'm going to be looking for a question from you specifically, probably about my hats, Lisa, because you keep bringing them up. So let's do it. Let's start
That's
integrating more like sports athleisure wear style type questions on this show. Let's do it. I'm here for it. Thank you for introducing it, Lisa. We're going to start doing more of it. Thank you, everybody, for listening along to our episode. You can follow us on Twitter at Attacking Third for so much more. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, anywhere you're listening to your shows. Again, leave us a 5-star review on Spotify. Leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts with a question, and we'll answer it during the mailbag segment. We're available as video. Subscribe to us. Visit youtube.com/Attacking Third. And we will be back on Friday with so much more. If you haven't already, here's a quick plug. Celebrating Women's History Month with Title IX Tuesday, we've got interviews with United States Women's National Team midfielder Sam Mewis and WNBA coach Sandy Brondello. Check those out on our feeds. For Sandra Herrera and Lisa Roman, this was Attacking Third.